Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their career or people who might be in transition or feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Welcome to episode 100. Woohoo! This is so exciting. And as I was contemplating how to make my 100th episode special and talking to some folks about it, several had suggested that this interview be my story. And when I was with my peeps, my wise women, Sarah was on the call and she enthusiastically said, "Oh, I'll interview you." And so I jumped on that notion. So I'm very excited today to be telling my story and to be in the hands of Sarah Van Rensburg, who is the CEO of Colorado Thought Leaders Forum. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. It's such a joy to be with you and an honor, because I think the way you draw out people's stories is such a gift. So I'm excited to help you tell your story today.
Oh, that's so sweet. And I got to tell you folks, I've seen Sarah in action as well, interviewing others, whether it's one-on-one or in a panel, and she is masterful. So she's not only the leader of the Colorado Thought Leaders Forum, but she's a thought leader herself and a visionary. And I would go on to say, a real thought provoker, Sarah. I guess that's one of the things when I think about all the meetings that we have, that's always how I'm left feeling, is I'm like, wow, I never really thought about it in that way. Or she's so intentional and purposeful. So anyway, I'm excited today, folks, but I'm nervous being on this side of the microphone and obviously on the camera. This is another, we're doing a little video today. So this is all new stuff. So I guess on that note, maybe we were just ready, and Sarah, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. So I'd love to start off with a question you always begin your podcast with, this: where did you grow up?
I grew up Elizabeth, Colorado, which this was the 70s. So it was very different than Elizabeth, Colorado is today. No stoplight, just a very small town. We had 40 acres. And the reason we were in Elizabeth was that my dad wanted to build his own house. And he was a machinist by trade and just someone who was a can-do kind of person. And so we lived in the house while we were building the house. So it was a very odd kind of upbringing in terms of the house not really always being finished, yet we're in the house. I mean, there wasn't doors, there wasn't carpet.
Wow.
It was kind of a, but it was a very fun environment in a way. My mom made it the best of it. She had curtains on the windows, even though there wasn't paint on the walls. So it was a very rural community, which I think Elizabeth is a little different now. It's just considered maybe more of a suburb of Denver.
So how many people were living in the house? Where were you in the birth order?
I'm middle child. Mom had 3 girls in 3 years. I shouldn't say just, mom, but mom and dad. 3 girls in 3 years, exactly to the date, because my sister Debbie was born on my sister Terry's birthday. So exactly 3 kids, 3 years, and I was smack in the middle. And as a middle child, I will tell you, I think I demonstrated all of the middle children personality traits, harmony, adaptability. I was usually doing things with Terry, or then I was doing things with Debbie, but I was very much in the middle. And in fact, when I have done personality tests now as an adult and through my career, I landed in the middle on almost all of these tests, right? Like between introvert and extrovert, I was in the middle. When you look
classic,
yeah, I mean, and at one point I thought I used to call myself Gumby, because I thought I really couldn't make a decision. I didn't really have opinions on things. But then I realized what I didn't really cherish was what I was bringing to the table, as much as I wasn't that driver that I saw maybe some of the other leaders being. But anyway,
small town, how did it shape you growing up in such a rural environment?
Well, I think the other part about being a part of such a small town was it was intimidating when we did go into Denver, and even into Castle Rock, which was bigger than Elizabeth. So you feel a little bit like an outsider, and I guess maybe the word hick. I didn't feel like I was in style, in fashion, and we moved to Castle Rock my junior year. So I went from a high school of we had 70 kids in my class, maybe 500 in the whole high school, and then now my senior year, or my junior senior year's class, was 500 kids in my class. So it was Douglas County High School, probably 1,500 kids total, because it was 10th through 12th grade. So it was a pretty big shock to go from, I was kind of a big fish from a sports perspective in a small pond. Now I'm going to a big pond, and how do I find my way? And I kind of ended up maybe a medium-sized fish in the big pond.
That's great. Tell me a little bit about how your career started out.
Didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. My older sister was very clear. She wanted to be in business, and she knew right away she didn't know exactly what that looked like, but she just knew she wanted to be in business. And so she got a job right out of high school at American Express, working in their money order division. It was a local division here. So she was well on her way there. I had no clue. I could type. So I found a job at a printing company as a typesetter. And my grand plan was I could work nights and then hang out with my friend Lori during the day. Because she had a pool in her backyard. What I hadn't factored in was that I might need to sleep. And so that wasn't a very, very good plan. But
you were young.
Yeah, we didn't need sleep. It's overrated. But I started out as a typesetter at a printing company, and then moved into pre-press foreman, and then pre-press manager. And it really gave me some graphic design background, but also probably got me well on my way from a management and a leadership perspective. I was kind of a natural leader. I guess I didn't talk about, I was working at the Dairy Queen. And right away I had I don't know, my parents raised all three of us to be very responsible. And that was just a core competency. So wherever any of us went, we just kind of took in, kind of got more and more responsibility. So even at the Dairy Queen, I was running shifts and closing the store, opening the store, things of that nature. So once I got into the printing company, I didn't really have aspirations that I wanted to be climbing the ladder necessarily, but I did just want to be learning and doing more stuff. So
all that experience being in the middle of those two siblings, managing up and down both.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that before, that, I was always kind of, navigating the landscape there. And then that company was moving, and one of my colleagues there, we hung out with my sister at American Express. And so he got a job with her at American Express. But I was in the mindset of, my sister's not going to get me a job. I don't need, I do this on my own. I don't need someone else to help me through this. So I then got a job at a newspaper, Sentinel newspapers. I don't know if you ever are familiar with those. And it was really, and I was the pre-press manager. So it was title was pretty grand. Money was not. They didn't come through on their promises, even after, talking through it with them. And so it was, and I was working like, 10 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, 5 days a week. It was really a long hours, but so
exact opposite of what you thought, which was, play in the pool all day.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. But it was kind of funny because one day after I heard that the company just got bought by another company, and anyway, I was kind of frustrated. So I finally made that call to my sister, and I said, you got Ernie a job at American Express. Can you get me a job? And it was one of those kind of desperate, funny pleas. And it was just, I hadn't really put much thought into it. And she's like, oh, well, are you looking? She called me back that afternoon and said, you have an interview tomorrow morning. Just so happens that they were looking for a supervisor in one of the new products that they had launched. And the internal candidates weren't playing out, and they were really impressed with my management experience. And so I had an interview the next day and had several more interviews because I was her sister. They really wanted to qualify. And then I got a job at American Express in American Express MoneyGram. which many people may not know that that's where MoneyGram started, was with American Express. And then American Express then IPO'd as First Data. And then First Data ended up buying Western Union. And through the Federal Trade Commission, they couldn't keep both Western Union and MoneyGram. So then they spun off MoneyGram. But I stayed with First Data, not with MoneyGram at that point. So
Kathy, as you look back on your career, it's so interesting that you were managing at the Dairy Queen and that just was always your trajectory. If you think about it, what was it about you that was either always attracted to the opportunities or that they found you? And why do you think those management opportunities came so easily to you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because when I was young, I didn't have any training. It was probably just that I was reliable. I was highly reliable. I showed up on time. I did what I said I was going to do. And I was smart, and I was, I guess I was somewhat personable, even though I will tell you later when I got more into corporate, I think I lost that.
I doubt it.
And I kind of came into that mode of this is how supervisors should be. And I got more training, and then I got a little bit caught up in the this is how I should operate versus being my authentic self. But I do think maybe it was just kind of a natural, a lot of times it's just a willingness to take on and do more. And, some people don't want that. They don't want the headache or the responsibility, but I was willing to. I think that's one of the themes in my life. When I do look back, I did say yes quite a bit early on. And I was in that mode of yes. And sure, I'll do that. I'll take that on. And what's next? What I probably wasn't savvy about was, if I do take that on, how much more money does this, how much more money do I get? I just kept doing more because I was probably flattered that I was asked to do more.
Looking back, though, do you think that opportunities came because of that? Because I'm asking this because that was something that I experienced when I was young too. Always, if an opportunity comes up, I don't want to miss it. I can do that. I'll say yes. And I found that later, not getting more for those things I did, it kind of balanced out in the long run. How about for you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Because I got a lot of exposure and a lot of opportunities. So like I would say, when I got to American Express as a supervisor, they also had employee activity groups and stuff. And so then I got asked, well, do you want to participate or be a part of the employee activity group? Well, that's extracurricular. That's extra work on top of your regular work, right? Of course I said yes. So, and then we had the companies back then, there was this thing called the corporate games, where local corporations competed like in Olympics against each other, and it was all to benefit the Special Olympics. And so there was things like volleyball, there was track and field, there was tennis. There was probably 10 or 12 different sports that the corporate games emulated, just like the Olympics. So, of course, I raised my hand. Oh, I'd love to be part of that, because I was playing volleyball and I had run track in high school. And so not only did I participate as an athlete, but I also then helped as a corporation. How do we pull all the teams together? Do we have enough teams, and that type of thing? So that again, but then what happens is you end up getting exposure. And I didn't do this for the exposure. I did it more for, I wanted to run track and I wanted to play volleyball. But you end up then doing a presentation at the end of it within the company. So you end up getting exposure in a way that you don't even really know that you're getting, right? It's just more, I just thought this would be fun to have other employees, and how do we as a company go out and kick some butt against some other company? We were competing against companies like Excel Energy, which was, I think, public service at the time, and Coors and storage tech, and all these other big corporations. This was the 90s.
How well or let me ask a different way. How did it serve you to have that athletic streak, that competitive? You just said kick some butt. Obviously, you like to win. How did that show up in your corporate career?
Well, I think it showed up in that I didn't want to look bad, so I wanted to perform and excel. So I did, I feel like I did get that exceeds performance reviews, and I got promoted. I moved up and I moved into other areas. So I do think it probably suited me that way. Corporate was a really good fit for me. And, and then also my older sister was working there as well during this time frame. So I also had a role model in her. But it was really a good fit. Our younger sister had decided to take on more of an entrepreneurial route. And I remember both, my older sister and I commenting, that's not us. I liked corporate, and maybe that's part of that athlete again too. The rules, the score. I want a supervisor, then I was a manager, then I was a director, and then a vice president. So I kind of, that's the score, right? And that's how I know that I'm achieving and moving up, as well as I'm saying yes, and I'm learning and growing, and I'm helping moving the needle for the company as well as for the teams and the employees. So.
What was it about the corporate environment you were attracted to? Because you mentioned your sister was doing the entrepreneur thing. What did you notice about that made you know corporate was a better fit for you?
Even within corporate, there was an element of I could do more. I wanted to do more. So as when you're in a management role, you looked at, well, here's my job. Here's the things I got to get done. And then here's the other goals I wanted to get done. And it wasn't, there was no shortage of things to get done. I worked in an operations area. So there was, the day-to-day operations that needed to get done. But then there was the backlog of stuff that needed to get cleaned up. And then there was the new processes to improve. So, when you're in management, I feel like there's kind of that you do have to really figure out a way to, I'm either going to work 8 hours, 10 or 12, how many hours am I going to work and how much am I going to be doing versus leading the people and how much can they work? So turning it on and off, I guess, is something that I saw in corporate. I was struggling with doing that anyway, let alone when I saw my sister who was the entrepreneur. How do you do that when you're the boss, you're the one coming up with the idea, so I didn't feel like, entrepreneur just wasn't in my blood. I really felt like the corporate really helped me. It gave me enough structure to know what I needed to do, but within that structure, I felt like I could even excel and then know what to do inside of that structure.
And Kathy, I know a little bit about your background and that you were, you asked to step in and lead the Women's Vision Foundation. And you kept on growing, you kept on taking more responsibility in your career. I'm wondering, what does your leadership style look like? Like, what do you think it takes to be a great leader of teams?
Oh, that's a tough question, man. I would say, and this is something that I've developed more recently, which is I want to, as a leader, I think it's important to create an environment where people can do their best. And I know that sounds pretty altruistic, but it's really, if people aren't bought in and moving things forward, you're not going to get where you need to be. And I think early in my career, I didn't really get that. I thought it was more about they should know their jobs. I'm here to make sure they know their jobs and force. So I was in more of a manager mindset, I think, than a leader and a developing a culture mindset. But as my career evolved and as I moved up from management into more leadership, I did get exposed to that Women's Vision Foundation, which is where, the wise women come from. I started out as a recipient of their programs, but then as I developed more and got more confidence and, more experience, then I became kind of on the other side of the equation as a mentor, and then having mentors even who are even more senior. So I guess when I think about leadership, I look at, there's just so many great leaders out there that I want to emulate, that I see can move things forward. And then also, how do I step into that? And I don't know if I'm answering your question. I feel like
you are. And I was struck by something you said earlier, where your authentic self was leading at Dairy Queen, and it's been that way your whole entire career. And then you said there was a moment when you started, doing, this is what a manager should be, or getting in that manager mindset. And it seems to me that you're leading now and that you've returned to your authentic self. What advice would you give someone else who's stuck trying to be what they think a manager should be when who they actually are is enough?
Well, yeah, and you nailed it on the head, because that's exactly what was going on for me, is I didn't think I was enough. So I thought, well, how and who should I be as a manager versus just being myself, and then recognizing here's the functions that I do in this role, and that we're all doing functions, and but yet we're still human beings and we're people. So I guess that would probably be my advice, back to myself is, who are you being? Who are you being first? We're all human beings. And then how can we talk through what needs to get done and how we're going to get there? And being more open about that. I think I was almost afraid to have those conversations because I expected or thought people maybe should know that. But I think it's easy to get stuck, and it's also easy to get coached into, well, here's, early on in my career they focused more on our weaknesses and what we needed to do to develop them. I remember goal setting every year was, well, and then pick a weakness and figure out what you're going to do to develop that. And then, after I kind of get through 10 years of that, and in 15 years even, and that's probably, I think, what Women's Vision brought was, the whole Strengths Finder tool and figuring out, well, what are your strengths? And now how do you maximize your strengths versus really focusing on your weakness? So, so back to your point about not being enough, I think I tended to be in that mode of, and maybe that's the athlete side of me too, that you're always, practicing and driving for more and better and higher performance. So there is this thing about I can get better, therefore I need to improve, which then might mean, am I enough? No, because I got to get better and I need to improve. So it's easy. I think it's easy to get caught in that trap. And I've had to spend a lot of time on my mindset around that I am enough and that I am moving forward still, and I'm learning and growing. There's nothing wrong with learning and growing, but still I am enough.
That's so encouraging to hear, because you had a career that was extremely successful. You led huge divisions, and I think it's refreshing sometimes to know we're not alone, and every one of us in some way doubts ourselves and has to say, no, I can do this. This is okay. So clearly you've got a lot of stories of doing that. And I want to dive into your current one a little bit, which is being an entrepreneur. But first, could you share a little bit about how you ended up leaving corporate?
Yeah, so leaving corporate was interesting. I had survived many of the downsizing initiatives that happened in corporate and navigated my way around that. But then I reached a point, I was kind of in a spot where it wasn't really a best fit for me. And so I was offered a severance package. So I did leave corporate in 2010. And then I decided to celebrate and play for about a year. Woo, it was the year of Kathy. And that was really fun. And then start looking for, well, what is going to be next? And I kept looking for what's that next corporate thing. And I didn't really find a good fit. So I finally moved into a mindset, well, what if I did some consulting, not out on my own, but with a company that does kind of placement of consultants. So I got connected with a group that did that. And they placed me back at Western Union as a consultant. Western Union was part of First Data. So I knew the people, I knew a lot about the products and the services. And I was primarily more on the First Data side, but I still knew quite a few on the Western Union side. So I was a consultant doing what I had been doing at First Data was strategic enterprise initiatives, which in this case, Western Union was doing some major strategic enterprise initiatives around the world in terms of the number of locations. And unfortunately, they were doing some downsizing, and then I got kind of caught up in that type of a role again too. So yeah, so it seems like probably the last 5 years in corporate for me, I ended up being in initiatives that were about downsizing, because that's kind of, I think corporations go through those normal peaks and valleys, whereas at the beginning of my career, I was more on a product side and we were all about growth and sales. And, so that was a really fun part of being in corporate. So I'm consulting. I got asked to be a interim CEO and president of the Women's Vision Foundation, which had changed its name to the Leadership Investment. And I was kind of in between my consulting gigs, and it was really fun to step into an organization I had been on the board, I'd been so close and part of for so many years and enjoyed, to now actually sit in that seat and be the CEO. It was a small nonprofit organization, but still, when you're still the main and the only, the primary decision maker, it was a great opportunity. I think that really helped me kind of really focus on how do you be a leader and how do you create an environment where people, want to bring them their best selves and that they know what they're doing and they're on fire. So I did that for a year. Then we hired the new president. And then I decided really needed to step out and figure out, well, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And that's when I decided to take my hobby of doing photo books for friends and family and turn it into a business. And I read that book, You Are a Badass, how to stop doubting yourself and live an awesome life. And basically, kind of tells you, just you gotta stop talking about it and do it. And so I started talking about, I'm going to do this. And then I got a consultant who helped me launch in 90 days. I mean, I had nothing. I had no name or website or processes or anything. But anyway, she helped me launch in 90 days. And that was 5 years ago. Can you believe it? I'm also celebrating, by the way, my 5-year anniversary has happened in May. So this is a lot of milestones for me.
It is. And Kathy, corporate was an environment you were excelling at. And it sounds to me like it was predictable. Like you knew kind of what was ahead, what the next opportunities were. And so now here you are looking through the windshield at a totally different way of living, a totally different life. What did it feel like deciding and choosing to be an entrepreneur, in essence, selling yourself? What was that experience like?
It was scary as hell. Which is why I think I was just kind of sort of talking about it for a little bit. And then when I read the book and they're like, either you're doing it or you're not, and if you're a badass, you're doing it. And so, but before that, I was looking for validation, and I realized that is what I was looking for. So I'm like, I'm doing this. And so once you make a decision and step into decisions, then things become a lot more clear. But it was really scary. And but I think in a way I did it really smart, in that I know, even though I'd been in business in corporation for 20 some years, I didn't know how to start a small business. So that's why I hired a business coach, and I've continued to hire coaches that help me with certain expertise, because I realize I'm not someone who can do it all. And I think that sometimes can be such a a big downfall of the entrepreneur is, doing it all, not recognizing when they want, have a coach. If it had been up to me, it had taken me a year to launch my business, because that's in my mind how long I thought it took to launch a business. And she's like, no, we can do this in 90 days. And we were up in 90 days. And I was way more efficient. I had all these things, because again, I relied on someone who had expertise in launching a business. So very scary. Again, I don't have that DNA. And then I also wasn't prepared for the ups and lows and the emotions of being an entrepreneur and putting yourself out there in that way. It's really, yeah.
Talk a little bit more about that. I mean, what has caused your ups and downs, and how have you found the courage to keep on going?
Well, that first year, the ups and downs were, around you, you kind of put it out there and everybody's excited for you. And then what was hard is that everybody starts telling you what you need to do. And of course, I'm new and I'm a listener and I'm a learner. So I'm, kind of taking all of that in. So it was a bit overwhelming. You start getting some interest in clients. And so you have this big high on, oh, these projects are going to come through. And then they don't come through, and then you get really low, and then you talk to someone else and you got more excitement. And so the first year, I think the highs and lows were more extreme. And then the second year starts to flatten out a little bit. And finally, I remember Jamie Shapiro, a fellow wise woman, we were having lunch one day, and she had made the comment about, well, how long have you been doing this? This is, and she's like, oh, so you've already been through year 1, year 2, yeah, the highs. And it's the way she articulated it, I just was like, oh, thank you for saying that, because I didn't realize, you think it's just you. Yeah. And it was it was just an emotional roller coaster. And she was validating it, that's really, that is what the entrepreneur goes through. And I think the other thing I didn't really fully grasp before it started was how hard it was going to be to sell myself. I'd been selling myself in a way when I was in corporate. I was in, service roles, selling my ideas and plans and propose, different things. Wasn't selling to clients. I was usually the one coming in from a service perspective to help close deals and stuff, but I wasn't, the cold calling and the selling and the moving things through the pipeline. So learning sales techniques, but then, it's different too when you're selling a product versus all of a sudden I'm selling me. So now it's like, well, and then is my pricing, is it good? Is it high enough? Is it right? Is it too high? Is it, what's my value? And yeah, so there's just a ton of doubt that creeps in. So again, I had coaches. I also joined a peer advisory board which really helped me work on my business with other entrepreneurs who are working on their business. So it's like a mastermind group. And then there's a coach leading it. So that helps because then you have a coach and you have, access to all of these great resources. And then I got connected to Colorado Thought Leaders Forum, through the Wise Women initially, and then joining the Strategic Connections group, which is, more referral based and business to business. How can we help each other? And so I guess, I have to find, because in corporate, you have all these tribes and people. In entrepreneurial, you don't, it's yourself. And I think that was another really hard thing, was the loneliness of it and being by myself. And how do I bounce ideas off people when there's no people to bounce ideas off of?
Yeah, that's a very real thing. And entrepreneurship is finding that courage. And, another thing I heard a little bit in what you were saying is, well, now I'm selling myself. So success means that I get people to buy me. And we can put a lot of pressure on that. I'm curious, how did your definition of success evolve and change from being in corporate to being a new entrepreneur to where you are now?
Oh, that's been a lot of mindset shifting. And I would say therapy, but it hasn't really been therapy that I've been paying for, but it's been a lot of different mindset classes and, about entrepreneur, but just in general, it is really tough, because when you're in corporate, title is one way you measure success, level of responsibility, salary, bonuses. There's all kinds of things, right? And I know those are all external things, and you don't even realize how important those things are until they're gone. In fact, I remember when I left First Data, the first networking event I went to, now I don't have a title. What do you put? Former? I'm a former, whatever. So thank goodness at the time I was a board member at the Women's Vision Foundation. So I could put Women's Vision Foundation, or I could talk about things in that way, but it was really hard to have, there's no title. And it's funny, I didn't really think that those things were important to me until you don't have them. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, okay, now what? And how can I be? And you think of to the size of, my new company compared to other companies. And I know that, I wasn't measuring my company to like a First Data, but, you would go to other, other events where other entrepreneurs are. And I'm like, well, how big are their companies and how are they growing and how are they meeting clients? And so, you want to be learning and growing at the same time you're kind of comparing. And yeah, I tended to come up a lot short. So, not always feeling positive and strong about how things were going. And then you look at, well, how much revenue am I making? And is that the measure of success for my business? And so I do have to keep bringing myself back to, I started this business to really create meaningful stories and, help capture and celebrate people. And that is not revenue, is not the metric for that.
I love what you just touched on, because anyone who's never been an entrepreneur, I think, would have a hard time imagining or understanding what the internal battle of entrepreneurship is. Like, how do you overcome those gremlins and the self-doubt? You just said something that I think is really important, which is remembering why you started in the first place. So, Kathy, why did you start your business in the first place?
Well, I started because when I left First Data, it was 20 years. It was 20 years in May, and then I got laid off in July. So it was like, boom, hit the anniversary. Now you're gone. And I remember driving away, and that last day with my 4 boxes, my boss was remote, my team was remote, so no one was walking me out, and it was very lonely. And on top of that, I get in my car, and the song "Freebird" by Leonard Skinner is on the radio, and the verse is, "If I leave here tomorrow, will you still remember me?" And I remember bursting into tears because it just hit me. I'm driving away, the building's in my rearview mirror, and no one was there to say goodbye to me. And oh, by the way, I was always the one who, had celebrated people leaving, celebrated projects at the end. I always made sure there was this recognition thing happening, and yet here I was 20 years later. So anyway, I know this is kind of a long story. The good news is the next verse changes to, but I'm as free as a bird now, and this bird you cannot chain. And I'm like, oh, so I went from like tears to, enthusiasm in about a mile driving away from the building. But it just really struck me that, well, what do I have to show for 20 years at a company, and how can I capture that with what I had already been doing with telling stories around celebrating projects, celebrating when people were leaving the organization or having big anniversaries. So I kind of have this inner drive about celebration, which is why, that I was compelled to do that. How can I do that for others? How can I do that for other people's careers and then other families? So that's probably how the driving force for me.
That's beautiful. If someone was listening to this and they too were in a situation where they were facing letting go of something that they knew, perhaps not being celebrated the way that they would have hoped, what would you tell them? Like, how would you encourage them to make peace with leaving that behind?
I think if you can honor what you did create, I do think there's an element of looking back. How can you reflect back on what are the things that you've accomplished, and not what maybe you still want to accomplish, but what did you accomplish? And I think this is the sad part, when you look at high school graduation, big celebration, college graduations, big celebration. There's these milestones in life where we celebrate and we have speakers and we inspire and we talk about the next chapter, and then that never happens again. When you think about it, you have a wedding, maybe that's, time for celebration, but there's not that next, keynote speaker for your life to say, oh, you're 30 now, what's the next step, or what's the next chapter? It's just kind of, you're expected to maybe keep moving forward. But so I do think it's super important to look back. And in fact, I will tell you that doing these podcasts for me has been really so rewarding in that way, because I get all these people share their stories, and it reminds me of things that I've accomplished that I had forgot about, that I hadn't really given myself credit for. So a part of what's happened through the podcast, I think, is I have really stepped into, wow, again, back to that, I am enough. I've done some great things, some really fun things. So have other people. You don't take that away from them or build me up anymore. But it's, you can really step back and go, wow, that was really a great opportunity. I was part of a high performing team and we did some really good stuff. So, it's so, I don't know how to describe the value of having that warm feeling or that satisfaction or sense of accomplishment, and just being okay or at peace with it, versus that, either feeling bitter about it or maybe feeling like it was, there's some things that are left undone. I don't know. It's really more of a just reflect back, be at peace. It's almost like, who's the woman who wrote the book about, getting rid of the stuff, the decluttering, and that you kind of take a piece of clothing and you hug it and you say, oh, thank you for the joy that you've given me all these years, but now it's time for you to move on. And then you can, put it someplace else. It's almost what we need to do with, when you leave one organization and really close and then step into something new.
And you're hitting on another thing I think is so powerful, which is being able to release the external validation and find our own, because oftentimes we get celebrated for things, but do we even stop to celebrate ourselves? Like, what really mattered to me? I love that you're hitting on taking time to decide, well, what mattered to me? What am I proud of? As you look at what you've done these last 5 years, what are you most proud of?
Well, that I'm still here. I'm most proud of that I continue to, I think, evolve. I'm loving this story. Every client I have is my favorite client, because it's my client right now. But it's so fun telling the story. I mean, there's so many wonderful stories out there that I've done through the photo books. I'm doing one for a client whose mom is turning 60. And so she's going to surprise her by, celebrating her life story and putting it in a book. So that's so fun to just know that energy is going on. I just did one for a client whose mom is 91. and looking back at her life. And she immigrated to the United States, and we had video of her mom telling stories about her as a young girl growing up in World War II and having to search for food and having to evade the Germans. And, and those are now, that's part of my evolution, is now including QR codes in the printed book. So not only do you have this printed book that tells a story in an organized way of their family history and memories, but now you've got mom herself telling the stories in her accent, in her personality, and it's captured and it's live, and so it really brings the story to life. So I feel like what I'm most proud of is that it's a really cool thing that I'm doing, and it's I have to stay in the moment of that, and continue to celebrate what each of these stories mean to each of these family. That family, by the way, initially there are 5 kids, and they were going to do a book for mom, and then for the 5 kids, and maybe some of the well, they ended up buying, I think, 35 books total for their.
Oh, wow.
So not only mom, the kids, the grandkids, I think siblings and friends of the family. So when you start to look at the touch and the reach of that these stories take, and that now this family has this history all put together in one place, and the dad had written an autobiography, and so we have a QR code that links to his autobiography. So anyway, I think that's probably what I'm most proud of on my photo book side. The other thing is just doing the podcast was something that was an idea that kind of came out of when I was in corporate and in some of those leadership roles. I was in a mentoring circle, and I learned so much when you start talking to other people. Like I said, when you feel like you're alone, that's not a good feeling. And so when you find out from other leaders that they didn't know what the right decision was, but they just had to make a decision. I mean, when you get behind the scenes, it's amazing. And so that's what I wanted to do with the podcast, was to, just as I introduced it, is for people so that they can either get new ideas or just recognize they're not alone, and there's comfort in that.
There is.
So now I can't believe I've done 100. I'm surprised.
What are a couple of the gems that you just think about, all those legacies, all those stories, all that wisdom that you have told through book form, through podcast form? What are a couple of the themes that stand out that you personally have learned because of other people's stories?
Well, I've learned it is so important to have access to these memories and these family stories. It is really priceless. When they get done, what I think my sister summarized it well. We did a book for her daughter, so my niece, for her high school graduation, and my sister said, I don't look at the book. I don't sit down and look through it every day or every month or whatever. But just knowing that it's there and that everything is put together and organized and that I have it, she said, I can't tell you the peace of mind that brings to me. And I know that families, I can tell you how many families have said to me, oh, I wish I'd have done this before mom or dad passed away. And I'm like, well, we still can, because that was another fantastic family story. Was we did it after dad passed away. Mom passed first and then dad passed. And we did their story, and then it really brought the siblings together. They ended up having a family reunion. So there's ways, anyway, those are the gems, I think, on the book side. On the podcast side, oh gosh, I think one of the really cool things is I've been learning so much about careers and how people navigate careers, but also the different careers that are out there, and this whole thing that you can really, so many people have said, you just follow what you're interested in, what you love, and you'll find a way to make it work. And that is so true in some of them. I mean, some of the careers I interviewed a woman who is a love doctor. Well, who would have thought? She was actually a police officer. Was her original dream in life was to become a police officer, which she did.
Oh, wow.
And then she went into corporate security, and then she ended up leaving to become a love doctor. I interviewed an animal chiropractor. I didn't even know that existed. One gal, and she's 24, is leading a space travel group, and I'm not exactly, but they're creating an army of citizen astronauts who are going to go into space when space travel is available.
Wow.
And they're training them on what to expect when they get up there from a leadership perspective, but then what is going to happen to them when they come back, because there's something that happens when you're in space and you see Earth. I think it's called the overview effect. And that when you see Earth and you see the life from that, astronauts experience this a lot, they have a whole different perspective. So when these people go on space travel and come back, then she's going to be, you know, helping them. Well, how do we change the world now as a result of that? So what, I mean, she's 24 and she's running this company.
How about your life, Kathy? If you think about the lessons you've learned from your own life, what stands out as those nuggets that have really made the difference for you?
Well, it's funny. I ask it in my interviews at the end, you know, what served you best? And then I ask for words of wisdom. And when I was thinking about doing this interview, I'm like, oh, what am I going to say? How does that, play out? And I got to say, I do think what served me best, or what I think I'm getting out of this, is there are some great nuggets that I wish I'd had when I was, more involved in corporate. And that was, I learned this phrase, assume positive intent. And I wish, I think I operated with that because I was all about building relationships, so that when things went wrong, I would typically go in with, hey, this doesn't sound like so-and-so, we need to work through this. Or this doesn't sound, I wasn't about blame. It was about, how do we figure this out? Whereas it's easy to jump into the blame game. So I think I was assuming positive intent, but once you get a phrase or language around something, then it becomes more clear, right? And you can be more intentional about it. So that's one that I love. The other one I love that the Women's Vision Foundation had was a hand forward and a hand back. And I think that's a notion that I could really resonate with, because at any time you're the hand forward or you're the hand back, and how can you, and that's not about up or down or who's above or below or age or any of that. It really just is hand forward, hand back, how can I help others and be that connector? So that's been, I think, a part of me. And then one last one, I think, where over the years with all my different personal development, investing in my own personal growth, is this notion of that there's circumstances in life, and then there's what you're committed to. And you really have to ignore the circumstances and recognize when you're getting triggered and caught up in the circumstances, and be part of, really, what am I committed to? And, and that takes you back to your core. And so when you get shook or rattled or stressed, and it's hard to do in the moment. I'm not saying any of these things are easy, by the way.
You hit on that when you talked a little bit about, success, definition of success, and people are paying you, and is this business about the money? And then you remembered, wait, why did I do this in the first place? And that true north guided you back.
Well, yeah, and I guess, and my other true north, I would say, are my sisters that have guided me. In fact, I'm getting a little choked up here, but my younger sister really helped me the other day, because I was like, am I doing enough in my business? Am I, I'd like more projects. I'd like more clients. Maybe I should go in to do some more leadership stuff, because I love being in teams, and, I look at the wise women and I'm part of wise, how could I do more? I mean, again, I'm back into that chasing mode, right? And she, we were driving and she's like, Kathy, you have the perfect job. She says, you have the perfect life that you've created. I wish I had your life. She says, you have created the life where you bring your unique genius to the world, which is capturing and celebrating people's stories. You get to meet new and interesting people all the time in a meaningful way. And you learn and grow all the time. How is that not rewarding? How is that not enough? And, I was like, oh, okay. Well, again, now that I have a language around that.
Yeah.
That really helped me go, oh, that's totally enough. And so how can I stay in that?
Well, you, at the very beginning, you started this whole entire podcast talking about how this is meant for people who are transitioning or stuck, so that they can see some sort of wisdom and unlock, and the power of a life that helps people unlock a transition or get through a stuck thing is is a big deal, Kathy. And so I'm interested in what advice you would give someone who is stuck or in transition and they just can't see their way forward.
I think the first step is you got to talk to people. You have got to talk to people and be curious about what they've done to get unstuck. It's really been fascinating when, like when I was in transition, I had a friend who was also in transition. By the way, I hated the term transition, and I liked the term free agent when someone introduced that to me, because that sounds more powerful, right? Transition sounds like I'm bouncing around, not sure. But free agent was like, no, I'm looking for that best offer. I'm looking for that new exciting thing. But you have to talk to people and find out what they've done. And that's what I'm hoping to do with the podcast, is that it really just kind of stimulates ideas. And it's not someone telling you what to do. It's really that, you hear their story and you hear someone say, well, I was really impatient, or I was patient. And what I was doing is I was walking around the city and thinking to myself, what's next? What's next? And then bang, my intuition, something clicked in and it said, teach. This was my latest podcast, by the way. This is what happened. And, so these are the things that I'm finding so powerful, is just how people can tap into who they are, their authentic self. And you can only do that yourself. So, but I don't think you can do it by yourself. Does that make sense? If you stay in your head just spins and says the same thing over and over, and it's not breaking into new patterns. And so that's what I think is so cool about when you start talking to other people and find out, well, this person took this route and this person took that route, and this person got stuck over here, and then this is what they did. One person, she was stuck and she took a year off and she hiked the trail in Spain. I can't think. Yes. And so, now I'm not saying that that's the ticket for everybody, but, you have to kind of understand what's going to work for you. But I got to tell you, it's not going to happen if you stay in your head. You really have to talk to other people. And I would also say you have to be in action. And even if that action is reading a book, and that just takes you and stimulates new ideas. Again, I think it breaks that pattern of either sometimes when we're stuck, we feel sorry for ourselves. We're the only ones. We're just looking at things in a certain way. And, just like my sister had to kind of hit me upside the head about am I doing enough? Am I enough? She put those words out there. Other people are going to put words out there and you get motivated and stimulated. Sometimes it's taking a class. And it might be a technical class, not in technology, but technical as in maybe you want to learn more about engineering, or maybe you want to learn a particular tool, like maybe SharePoint, or, so sometimes it's taking a class, that's being in action. And then from that action, you go, oh, liked it, didn't like it, liked this part, didn't like that part. How does this now guide me? So, I really feel like you got to be talking to people and just learning and expanding and hearing different things, and then you can judge from that. Well, does that work for me? Does that not work for me? I don't know, but I hope I'm making sense here, but
it makes perfect sense. And honestly, what you've just hit on is the one piece of advice I wish I would have had when I was younger, because I spent so much time trying to think my way through stuck places, and you have to move your way through them. And I think your wisdom is spot on.
I guess one last thing I would add to that is, I listened to a YouTube, maybe it was a TED Talk by two professors from Stanford who wrote a book called Design Your Life. I don't know if you've read that or seen part of it, but a big part of what they talk about is, be curious, talk to people, take action. And so I don't want to take full credit for those statements, but I'm putting my own, I think, interpretation on that. But why I think they created what they did is because they're professors at Stanford. So these graduates from Stanford come out and then they're like, well, I've graduated from Stanford. What's the right first job? As in right, as in perfect. Right. And, one of the things he talks about during the YouTube thing is about how to get that word perfect out of, how do you get that notion of not enough and all the things we've been talking about, right? That you evaluating that critic, that inner critic that just tends to overwhelm us and stop us versus, prompting us and moving us forward.
This is great, Kathy. And I could talk with you all day. I wish I could. One thing that I think is so powerful is we are here because you stepped out, you took action. You know, I'm gonna do this. And in 3 months, you started the business. Then you had the idea to start the podcast and thought about it. Then you just did it. So we're at 100 episodes. What do you see as your next action, that next thing ahead for you?
Wow. Well, I gotta say, I am relishing in the 100. It's funny, I don't have any interviews lined up after my 100 right now. So I've been, and usually I have a backlog in my pipeline. So there's part of me that's going, oh, well, maybe 100 is it. And I should, and just celebrate and move on. But I don't think I can, because I gotta say, each time I have an interview with someone, it is so powerful for that person to spend that time reflecting. And again, remember we talked about, I don't think people reflect enough, and how many people have said it's a luxury to spend this time talking about myself. It's a luxury to do this reflection, when many times, you know, we just don't take the time to do so. So I am going to continue doing a podcast. I thought about doing another type of podcast around some leadership matters, which could be fun, because I just have this, you know, I have this passion for good leadership matters. And when you do see good leaders and you have those nuggets, there's a way to do that. I don't know that it always fits so well with my storytelling, but I know I do think it's still, again, it's about learning from others, and it's a lot more powerful to learn from others, I think, through storytelling versus, you know, mentoring, or even, you know, any advice.
Agreed. And Kathy, I just want to acknowledge you. I think one of the reasons why what you're doing works so well is because of you're so humble and engaged. Your career has been so successful, and yet you want to just put the attention and focus on other people and engage them and be authentic. And I just think it's a real gift. And I appreciate being able to be a part of this with you today, and to celebrate 100, and what you've accomplished is really quite something.
Yay, 100. Well, thank you, Sarah. It has been a pleasure. It's been fun. Now I guess I have a better sense of how my interviewees feel being on the other side, because my first thought was, well, was this helpful? Did I sound rational? Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I have found throughout doing this, I had to get comfortable with hearing my own voice. Not just, you know, the sound of it, and then hearing my own tics and my filler words, but also then what is the content that I'm bringing. So I gotta say, I do love bringing people's stories to life. It has been a true pleasure and honor on my part. And it was an honor having you today taking me through my story. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And listeners, thank you for celebrating 100. This is very exciting. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe below, and then you'll be alerted to other interviews as they're published. And if you have any questions for me, or I guess if you'd like to get to know Sarah better, I will be posting this on my website, lifestorycurator.com, and you can post any comments there. And other than that, I guess I just say, stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing the stories.